Hi there. This is part 2 of my breakdown going over the new blog post that George R. R. Martin just made, which is the first one he's made in 4 months. And this one I'm going over my 4th and 5th out of 7 major points in it, which is he reiterated, quote, once the winds of winter is done. Not if, not even when, but once, implying soon, the winds of winter is done. He'll get back to some future Duncan Egg novellas. And the second point I'm going to get to in this video is that he said it's specifically going to be the village hero, and what is that about, and why do we think that? Start with, overall, from this post, he said, I saw all of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms Season 1. It is incredibly faithful, has my full seal of approval. It sounds like Martin is a lot more recharged from all of this. That I'm not going to give you measurements. I'm going to link you to Preston Jacobs' video he made right after this of saying how fast Martin gets things done. If when he's fighting with people or if he's under stress from things going on in his life, on a scale of the last 20 years, he obviously gets less done. But when he's in a better mood, when things are going well, he gets more writing done. So I can't give you a timeline, but he's doing better. And I really do believe that at the start of 2023, he could have gotten done by late 2024 if nothing went wrong. The problem is that he admitted quite a few things did go wrong in 2024, that he was arguing with HBO all of spring, and then he was busy with other things. He wasn't getting work done. He went on a long trip, which he said was very recharging, and a lot of his close personal friends have been dying, and another few died this year. And I feel bad about that this is, he's a person. These things happen. It's not like an excuse of, we can point to things that happened that messed up his schedule last year. That it's not just an empty, vague hand wave. I know why there were things that got in the way. And if you're not paying attention to this, it seems like, every other year it seems like he's saying a close personal friend died. He's of an age where his age cohort, is at the point where they're dying off like that for one reason or another. I remember when, within the span of 5 years, everyone I know's grandparents died. That there weren't any living grandparents anymore. That now that I'm no longer like 25 or something, I'm in my late 30s, there comes a point where there's a generational shift. And unfortunately, a lot of his friends have died in the past few years, and I understand that can deeply affect someone. And it's not as if he's making up a list of, and there's this other person you never knew that I actually had a deep personal relationship with. Preston Jacobs has gone over this more. If you look at a list of the authors who collaborated with him on projects like Wild Cards, or the people who helped him make certain conventions, even 10 years ago, there was a definitive list of these are Martin's close personal friends. And they're dying. It's not like he's inventing people we had never heard of. If you're at all familiar with the author circles he's with, like Gardner Dozois, if you don't know who that is, friend for decades, the man who edited the anthology collections that The Princess and the Queen, The Rogue Prince, and The Sons of the Dragon came out in. This is a man who was an editor on these things when they were in novella form. Died, and it affected him. So while I'm worried, people dying all the time like this is affecting his work, he's a human being, and his generation is starting to pass. Well, in the middle of that, and I understand that can affect someone like that. And another family member, he talked about in his blog post, another close family friend died over Thanksgiving from a long illness, so there's a lot of that. So I understand that Martin had a rough 2024. He gave solid reasons, not just, here's this other person you never heard of who died. It's like we know who his friends are. Or I was arguing with HBO all of the spring. I can only hope that's calming down a bit. We'll see. But measurably, things weren't going the way he thought they would. And I can't tell you how fast he's going to get done, other than that we know he's over 3/4 done. He said that. And even then it's relative. Like he said, he puts the hard chapters to last. Like The Red Wedding was really hard to write, so he put it last when he was writing Storm of Swords. So who knows if writing the last 2 chapters will stretch out for 6 months because they're really important chapters. I don't know. There's been other update videos on this. Like, He has openly stated, I finished every Tyrion chapter, like 2 years ago. The last Tyrion chapter is done. He's working on ones for other characters now, but Martin sounds really recharged from the Europe trip he took for Worldcon back last summer. He said, I was getting nothing done first half of the year. He was recharged from that, and he seems really enthusiastic now that he's seen, in rough cut, the last 2 episodes of Night of the Seven Kingdoms Season 1. And couldn't hurt, might help that I'm really thinking he might get a lot of writing done now. That an empty promise. Like, I don't know if he's going to finish the 7th book, but Winds of Winter, I realistically think the way we say it is progress. He's going to be making progress on it. Once the Winds of Winter is done, when there were times in like 6 months ago where he was openly wondering, will I ever get all this done? I'm not sure. He seems in a really good mental state now. That's the first of the 2 points I want to cover in this video. That he's reset and recharged by Duncan Egg. The second point is, in the blog post here, he said that after I finish Winds of Winter, he said this already for years, there's some Duncan Egg novellas which were mostly done, but I dropped what I was doing to keep working on Winds of Winter at a certain point. So that he said there were 2 that were mostly done, but he could crank out relatively quickly as a result. Out of a planned 12, and there's only 3 current ones, but he can knock out the 4th and 5th relatively quickly. And these 2 that we know of, working titles of course, are The She-Wolves of Winterfell, where they're going to be seeing the prequel Starks, and The Village Hero. And he's actually already said before, I'm not sure what order I'm going to release them in, and everyone thought probably She-Wolves of Winterfell, because, the Starks are important. In this blog post, he makes it very clear that the first one he's going to work on is The Village Hero. I think we're splitting hairs here, because he could probably get the 4th and 5th one done in rapid succession. And if you're going, oh, well, he's wasting time on this, if it really would take him another 10 years to write book 7, and he might not live that long, I'd rather he spend 6 to 12 months, 1 in the hand being worth 2 in the bush. I'd rather he spend 6 to 12 months cranking out these already mostly finished novellas, because he could do them quickly. Fair enough, at least be getting something. But I honestly think from the way he's described, they're mostly done. We'd be getting these things like one a year. Like, the second one will come out 12 months or so after the first. They're mostly done. Still, why is he now treating Village Hero like the first one? People theorize, oh, it's because there's so much stuff to set up and Winterfell will be more difficult. We have no reason to believe he's not being honest, when the reason Martin gave was, chronologically, there's things that happen in Village Hero which make more sense when they happen first than Winterfell. And given I think he's going to crank them out within a year and a half, I don't really take issue with that. I believe him. We have no reason to doubt that he said, I realize there's some things that need to come first in that. What did come up, because actually Red Team Review didn't understand why I was saying, oh, we know what this is the Village Hero is about, and I didn't give a citation, that actually he's right, the only thing Martin definitively said about the Village Hero is that it's set in the Riverlands. So let me clarify that there is a fan theory, and there's been fan speculation, that it's going to be about the Blackwood-Bracken feud, and involve Egg meeting his love interest and future wife and queen, Betha Blackwood. That, you're right, it's not 100% confirmed, but it is a widespread fan speculation with a lot of evidence. That there's a lot of hints in the printed, already done 3 novellas, indicating that Martin was foreshadowing and setting up he's going to do that in a later story. So, I'm 90% on this. We're pretty sure this is what's going to be coming. And in the interest of keeping this video short, I'm not going to read off each of them, but there's basically 3 reasons. Now, look at the screen, I'm just going to post the text up. Since the first novella, there are lines warning that the Blackwood-Bracken feud is going to have a bad flare-up soon. Very first novella mentions that Otho Bracken killed Lord Blackwood in a duel. By the second novella, after the plague hits, they say the Blackwoods didn't immediately go to war because Otho wasn't in line to inherit, but the older son died in the spring. He died in the plague. Now Otho is the heir. His father is elderly and dying. And the last thing the Blackwoods would permit is for Otho, who killed their lord, to now become Lord of House Bracken himself. And when he does, there will be a localized war. And on top of this, because Bloodraven is a Blackwood and, Bittersteel was a Bracken, he's not gonna intervene. They'll let it play out. Everyone, because there's a weakling king on the throne, everyone is pursuing their own local vengeances. So it is very heavily set up, particularly in the second one. There's going to be a flare-up of the Blackwood-Bracken feud. Second of 3 points. All of the hints about Pennytree. Dunk was squire to Sir Arlen of Pennytree, who taught him everything he knew and was the closest thing to a father he ever had. He grew up an orphan, and Arlen rescued him from that life. But throughout all 3 novellas, Dunk makes a point to remark, or in his mental narration, I've never even been to Pennytree. Like, he didn't know if it was in the Reach or the Riverlands. It's actually in the Riverlands. It's a village contested between the Blackwoods and Brackens. There's a quote in the first, the second, and third novellas of I've never actually been to Pennytree, even though this is my father figure is his home village, that you'd think he'd want to check that out. But the really big quote actually comes from Book 5, A Dance with Dragons, in the Only Jaime chapter, when he's negotiating the surrender of the Blackwoods at Raventree Hall, and he's going over the local histories and going over the map of these are towns that they want to cede as part of the peace deal. There's this quote where Bracken says, oh yeah, that one there is Pennytree. It used to be, contested between us, but 100 years ago it was made into a royal fief. What was happening 100 years ago? Dunk and Egg. Well, rounding up, it must have been like 80 to 85 years ago, going by the chronology of the novellas, but it seems like Dunk and Egg went there and ultimately had the town declared a royal fief, so it belonged to neither the Blackwoods or the Brackens to free the commoners there from the feud. And this is part of Egg's, let's say, progressivist reforms of, let's stop these lords from, and take away all of those rights they're claiming, that they're being mean to the commoners. And everyone going, well, sir, but these reforms are impractical. You're going to make a war if you keep declaring contested places a royal fief. Because as much as they hate that the Brackens are claiming it, they're not going to stand for a tyrannical king claiming it. So you can see it progressing like that, of him going, well, I'll just rule like an autocrat and fix all the problems through government intervention. So there's all these hints about there's going to be a flare-up with Otho Bracken specifically, that I've never been to Pennytree, and that stuff happened at Pennytree suddenly 100 years ago that made it a royal fief. And the third point of evidence is that we know from World of Ice and Fire that Egg married for love. It wasn't a political alliance. They said he married for love to Betha Blackwood. So at some point they have to introduce Betha Blackwood, which even more ties in with that we think they're going to visit Pennytree and the Blackwood-Bracken feud at some point. And I have other videos going over, we know what later novellas are about, that one would have to be about the third Blackfire Rebellion, for example. I think that's going to be the 7th one. The 6th one might be the Rat, the Hawk, and the Pig or something, but we know She-Wolves of Winterfell will now be the 5th one, that based on the timeline, it really looks like the village hero is them going to the Blackwood-Bracken feud where Jaime went 100 years later. Even if the most Martin has technically said is they go to the Riverlands. And it's great that House of the Dragon, both seasons 1 and 2, have actually set up the Blackwoods and Brackens now. They were barely mentioned in Game of Thrones itself. That they'll be very prominent in Dunk and Egg as well, because that feud just goes on forever. And as Jaime said, well, there is one way to stop it from going on forever, if some of them get killed. And no, even then, the young Blackwood kid goes to him, well, not really, because we've sealed every generation when there's a peace treaty, we seal it with marriage. So every Blackwood has some Bracken blood, every Bracken has some Blackwood blood, and if we ever killed all the Brackens, the Blackwoods would just break in half, with some of them claiming the Bracken lands anyway, so it's a hot mess. But Martin is feeling really recharged for writing Winds of Winter, and he thinks that when he does, he can in rapid succession crank out these 2 mostly done Dunk and Egg novellas, probably ahead of when the TV show gets them. We kept going on Game of Thrones. What if the books outpace, the TV show outpaces the books? I honestly think we could get the fourth and fifth novellas in print before they start filming season 4. Even if they said we're going to keep making these at the rate of roughly one per season, or he could show them the rough draft he has just to give them a sense of what to do. But I honestly think by 4 years from now we could be reading The Village Hero. After that, of course, because I've said I think this Dunk and Egg would go on for 7 seasons, because after the third Blackfire Rebellion there's a 10-year time skip, in which not much happens. So I don't think this is going to cover all 12 novellas are going to be in this TV show. I think there's going to be a sequel show, or they have to recast the leads as older people. Even so, we're looking at like at least a 7-season thing. I don't think they're going to double up novellas per season. Because Martin said season 2 would be The Sworn Sword, not The Sworn Sword and The Mystery Knight. But we'll see what happens of what'll we do if we don't have the 6th and 7th one in print yet, but I think we'll have the 4th and 5th novellas in print and ready to go, because he has repeatedly said they're mostly done. Well, why aren't they done? Because you told me to work on Winds of Winter. After the Winds of Winter is done, and he's feeling really good, and he's feeling really recharged, and these are the reasons we think it'll be, oh, it's just some nonsense in the Riverlands versus, well, what is interesting in the Riverlands? The Blackwood-Bracken feud and Egg's wife and all of that. So this was the second of 3 videos breaking down Martin's blog post. Please join me after the jump for the third part, which is the most speculative.